Hey, Lioness, welcome to the show, Lioness Conversations, where we help women be brave, to lead with confidence and joy, and to find your path to the most meaningful work of your life. I'm your host, Jen Porter, leadership and empowerment coach for ambitious and heart-centered women. You can find out more about the Lioness community and how to be a guest on this podcast at jenportercoach.com. Today, we have a very special guest, Kathleen Lucente. With a 30-year track record navigating the highest stakes of corporate communications, Kathleen, CEO and founder of Red Fan Communications, is the unparalleled expert CEOs and CMOs trust when launching big ideas or weathering a crisis. She built Red Fan on the revolutionary principle of providing the senior level integrated communications expertise she wished she'd had, making her the essential first call for B2B tech leaders facing their most critical challenges. Kathleen, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jen. Great to be here.
I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. There's so much richness in your story, and I can't wait to dive in and have you kind of make that come to life for us. So I'd love for you to start by telling us, what is Red Fan Communications and what are you focused on right now in this season?
Sure. Red Fan Communications is an integrated marketing and communications firm focused on B2B companies, specifically those companies that have either gotten their B series and they're ready to really rev up the engine for their marketing so that they can get where they want to be with an IPO, as well as very established companies that are anywhere between 25 million to a billion in revenue, but are needing to continue to reinvent themselves and scale at different levels. So we enjoy focusing on everything from helping clients grow through M&A, thought leadership, and obviously managing against any reputation risks.
Yeah, and you have a lot of experience helping companies, both, when you were in your Fortune 500 career and then now on your own, helping companies navigate all kinds of things. And it sounds like you really, you're kind of like a game changer. It sounds like you want to change up the way that agency is done, the way that communications are done and PR is done. What do you feel like is your real sweet spot?
Well, I think I learned about myself early on. I'm kind of like one of those people that you can't put in a box. So, and that is a benefit to my clients, meaning I need to understand your full business plan, and then how do we apply marketing and communications to that in ways that will advance you. And so, in the past, a lot of times people who are hiring or coming out to hire a PR firm or marketing firm, they're thinking of, I just need press. If I just get press, things will change. And usually we're sitting down and going, wait a second, let's look at the entire issue. What's broken? Are your sales team having trouble getting doors to open? Maybe your messaging isn't working. So I think for us, we're starting with that brand narrative work and doing sort of an audit of what is happening and what's not working and what is working. So we can set a data backed plan in place that every dollar matters that we spend with our clients to advance their mission. And that's a difference, because PR for PR's sake is not going to do much for a company. There's got to be strategy first.
I'm guessing that you find leaders that come to you have a particular agenda in mind, and then you're the kind of a person that actually wants to go way deeper and broader to understand the full context of what's happening. And so is there resistance? How do you get people to understand there's actually more at play here than what you're coming to me for?
Yeah, I had a great example the other day. A fantastic woman sent me a RFP. So she, sent it over, and I wrote back and said, hey, we just don't respond to RFPs traditionally unless a certain questions are answered. And she answered these questions. And then I said, I don't think we're going to be a right fit, but I am more than happy to come in and sit down with you and your board to walk you through why this RFP is not going to get you what you need. And I asked her, have you heard back from any agencies on this RFP? She said, yeah, she was very open, and luckily she was vulnerable. And I actually was able to go sit down with her and her board and just be as kind as possible and help them understand. I see what you're trying to get done. It's just that the way you're asking, you're not going to get it done. And you need to get this first step, that brand narrative work done. And if you don't get that done, nothing else is going to matter. And so luckily, she was willing to invite me in and be vulnerable. And I think being vulnerable and having a trusting relationship is where it all starts. If
Mhm.
it's just barking orders or write me a press release, that's really not the kind of relationship we're looking for.
Yeah. So the work that you do is because it's so broad and so deep, it seems like it would take time. It actually would you would have to be integrated in a sense with a company in order to fully understand it, to become that strategist that those leaders depend on. How do you get involved in that, and how long does that process take?
Yeah, the process that we go through first in even talking to a company, we are all about having probably about three conversations before we even put pen to paper with a proposal for next steps. And that is so we can get a read on, is this going to be the right relationship? Are we really compatible? I believe there's a big misstep when companies just say, send me a proposal. I mean, this is a relationship business. You better really enjoy, you're going to be spending time together. So you better enjoy the time, even in those first conversations, right? And so the next step of that is usually putting together that first project. And the first project is an 8-week audit, and that is interviewing people internally, externally, doing a full competitive analysis, and even an audit of their marketing materials, maybe their internal communications materials, to truly get a read on what is going on, what is being messaged out to the world, and how are people reacting, and then what's the disconnect, and how are we going to create something that is going to really lift off in the next 6 months with a campaign that has the right messaging, that has the right channels. So there's no assumption that, oh, you're going to need digital advertising and you're going to need all these things.
Mhm.
We do know that you're going to need to get your foundational messaging right. We do know that you're going to need to get your website right. We do know that your sales team's going to need to have the right deck. Your investor team's going to need to have the right content, and that it all has to hang together. And so that 8-week process is what I call almost like the insurance policy that most
Mhm.
companies should have in place. Through that process, we also ask our clients, do you have a crisis plan? And some companies are more proactive about that. We have a great healthcare company on board, and the CEO, she knows in the healthcare industry, you better damn well have a crisis plan. But every company should have that, whether you're going to have, protests or, an employee issue, or a breach is one of the biggest issues that we see companies dealing with today, breaches in data that can really take out a company. So we really make sure, hey, we offer this, we can put this plan together. And that way, when an issue bubbles up or a crisis comes to bear, you're not building the plane while you're trying to fly it. You
Yeah.
at least have a structure. And so those are the types of things that I call kind of your essentials. And then from there, we're able to build out customized campaigns that usually are retainers that are 6, 9, 12-month type arrangements.
Mhm. So it seems like the wise thing to do would be for companies to bring you in early, but I'm
Yeah.
guessing that a lot of companies are more reactive than what you would like.
Yeah, I mean, my dream is that companies just think, Kathleen and team, I should just be calling them. But realistically, usually people show up and life isn't neat, right? And so we have to respect that with clients. And so they might still be doing that brand positioning work with us, but they might have a big announcement that has to go out, even in parallel with that, and some other things that are going on. And we are realistic in that way with our clients. We say, what's all the stuff that's on the wall? Do you have a conference you're supposed to be at? Do you have a spokesperson that's supposed to be going to an event? We're not going to just say, hey, everything goes on hold. We're going to look at the reality and make sure that we can help them in parallel with as we're building the new plan so that the world doesn't just stop.
And do you typically know how long you're going to be working with a company when you get started after that audit, or is it really fluid?
I love that question because life has shown that it can be, a year, right? But most of our clients are with us 3 to 7 years. And I'm always saying, hey, when are they going to pull make the hires in house? I mean, they certainly usually have built out a marketing team in house, but our function, many of them love us just staying on board because CMOs today are so slammed with meetings. I mean, half the time, if you look at C suites today, they're in meetings all day. I don't know how they get the actual
Yeah.
work done. So when you have an outside partner that you really trust that is keeping the engine going, is constantly, making sure the award submissions are in and drafting the press releases and, ensuring that spokespeople are not getting left out of interviews, we're that engine that just keeps going. And I think that is a very valuable thing. And having been in that position myself, both at IBM and at JP Morgan, I've always valued having strong agency relationships. I think it's super, super
Yeah.
important because traditionally most corporations, they don't allow you to hire a lot of other people in house. And so
Mhm.
you might have a tight marketing team, but you don't necessarily, even if you had one person who is doing public relations, they're going to be overwhelmed. You're also probably going to get asked to handle internal communications. And we very often are helping CMOs champion why they need a budget for internal communications. I don't know why this happens, but internal communications, which is one of the most important things in a company, right, often is not structured or funded properly. And it should be coordinated with the CMO's office and the chief people officer's office with the C suite, right? But often it's like, hey, can you just get this done? As if it's just a bunch of one-off activities. And it
Mhm.
really is important. And I think most companies are coming to that realization. We did an audit for a company the other day, and we actually helped the CMO go forward and show her CEO that our employees want more communication, and here's the vehicles of how they would like that communication. And then we were able to do an audit on the type of communication that's gone out to date and the type of reaction they've had, and we were able to show them what's missing. And
Yeah.
so we basically supported her in getting the funding she needs to hire people in house and also use us as well as an augmentation in terms of us helping to build out the strategy as well. So that was a pretty cool exercise.
I want to go back to something you said and see what insights you might have from your experience in working with leaders. You said leaders are in meetings all day, every day. And that's the case kind of across the board. Once you're managing people and up, um, it's overwhelming. And, people can't get their work done. They can't implement anything that the meeting was about because they're in the next meeting. A lot of the clients that I work with are facing that. How do you advise? What have you seen work really well for leaders where part of it, I think, is having the confidence to carve out time that you need for those things, like working with you. Um, but part of it is like creating boundaries and strategies and maybe changing some things up internally within the culture of a company. But what have you seen that works?
Well, first, you just said the magic word boundaries. And I think that women in particular often have been taught not to create boundaries or that boundaries somehow creates a roughness or that you're going to be judged for creating boundaries. And I think it's so important for us to understand that there are really uh, fantastic ways to show respectful ways to express boundaries. And so I'm a big proponent of number one, internally teaching my own team how to block time. I say block time in the calendar and you have to block it. Don't just say, I think I'm going to do that. Block the time and then have another colleague, if a client's calling in, say, hey, she's in meetings from that time, but I will, if there's something urgent, we'll get back to you. We're still going to respect the client relationship, but we can't get the work done if
Exactly.
we're constantly in meetings, right? And clients do want us to get the work done. I think the other side of it is with our clients, we also want to respect our clients' times, right? So we'll say to them, we're only going to, if the CEO is extremely busy, we're going to get like a half day with you, and then we're not going to be bugging you, like because we're basically getting answers to questions that we can respond to for reporters, that we have like almost like a inventory of what they are. And if they then need more information, we can go back, right?
Mhm.
So, or meetings, we're not having meetings for meeting's sake. So one of the things about agencies is too often I would have a meeting with my agency, there'd be like 7 people in the room. All seven of those people are billing hours to staring at, me in a meeting, having a conversation. I only want the people in the meeting that really need to be there. And you may have meetings internally in advance, but let's not have a bunch of people in a meeting with a client that makes it seem like we're wasting their budget, we're using their time ineffectively. And also those people need to be also off doing work, right? So I think it's a fine balance. I do believe that, unfortunately, that starts from the C-suite, this idea that we're going to be a meeting culture. And I think that every year that needs to be inventoried and checked and changed. And there's an opportunity to change that culture, but you have to be proactive and set the example from the top.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you get involved in this work of communications and leadership strategy?
Ooh, good question, Jen. I mean, I think I fell into it. I Interestingly enough, the truth is, the moment I was a high tech journalist up in Boston, and early in my career, and it was a really lovely opportunity. I interviewed with the head of HR. She's like, "Hey, we don't have any jobs right away, but I really like the way you communicate, and you have a master's and from Boston College, and we'd love to consider this." Got a phone call, started helping a bunch of engineers who are writing for these high tech publications. I was not an engineer, and I wound up realizing that I could help them and they could help me. And very often, I would help read through their articles and say, "Hey, you're kind of making some assumptions about the reader here. We need a diagram or something." And on the flip side of this, I also had PR people coming in with clients from Japan and from Texas or all over to sit down with me and pitch story ideas. And I got to really see, some of these folks are really, really good. And some of them are missing the mark, or they don't have a fire in their belly around what they're doing. And I realized I had this opportunity to maybe step into this and see if I was good at it. And so that's sort of how I stepped into my first
Right out of
opportunity.
right out of grad school.
Out of grad school, yep. I was teaching freshman English at Boston College. I was working at a publishing house on high tech publications. I helped to launch the first biotech magazine, and then I went right into engineering publications at the same publishing house. And what happened, unbeknownst to me, was that Motorola here in Austin, Texas, right when I was thinking about looking at PR firms, they asked their PR firm to hire me because I could write about something very complicated, microprocessor chips, and make it tangible to your grandmother as well as to the New York Times reader or EE Times engineering publications. And so sometimes you have to learn about yourself. And so I was very lucky to see different angles on what was potentially my career. And that's how I am where I am.
Wow. It's amazing how we fall into our fields, isn't it?
It is. And I've been very lucky. A couple of times in my life, I've had things happen behind my back, unbeknownst to me, that are career driven. I think another example would be I was at a PR firm in New York City. I'd helped start their tech practice. It was doing very well. I had just become a partner. And all of a sudden, I kept getting calls from Chase. And I kept saying, "Well, I'm a partner. I was just made a partner." And I was about to get married, that year. And they said, "Can you just come on over?" And it turned out that CEO at Ketchum had said, "You should talk to Kathleen." And somebody else at the Wall Street Journal had said, "You should talk to Kathleen." They've been using a recruiter. It wasn't working out. They were looking for somebody who had banking and tech background. And next thing I know, I was hired as part of that merger, the JP Morgan Chase merger. And I was in charge of communication for Lab Morgan, which was basically their VC spinoff of fintech companies, which now today I do tons of work with fintech
Yeah.
companies. But
But did you have banking experience at that point?
I had been bringing companies public and been doing a lot of finance deals because it was the dot-com era.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't have, and we also were working in some early stage fintechs when I was at that small agency in New York
Okay.
City. And so that was really the only thing. I think the challenge was that the recruiter that the firm had hired didn't, they kept looking at banking people who didn't have tech background. And so I think they looked at me and said, well, she's got all the tech background.
Yeah.
And she's shown that she understands enough about the finance side. So let's go that route. And so
What
it
did that
panned
open
out.
up for you at Chase?
It opened up so many things. Well, it turned out that I left and went and got married. They said that when you get back, this job is yours. Accept it. By the time I got back, the merger had happened between J.P. Morgan Chase. I think there were 6 phone calls saying, "Don't worry, you still have your job. Yep, you still have your job. You still have your job." My
Wow.
husband and I just got
Did
back
you
from
know
our
that was going to
honeymoon.
happen? Did you know that merger was going to happen while you were
I
there?
did. Luckily, the
Yeah.
executive team had tipped me off that it was kind of clear that that potentially would happen, and that I had been assured that my job was going to be, fine.
Okay.
But joining a company right when they're in the process of doing a merger is a very interesting time because you also have people getting laid off, and you've got co-heads, and um, so I was in a good position to be able to really focus on my role. I wasn't distracted. I wasn't distracted by some of the things that other people would be distracted by in a merger because I hadn't been part of the merger. I
Okay.
was like Switzerland showing up, right? So that was interesting. And then I also helped with the crisis comm for 9/11. I actually saw the second plane hit. Was there it was one of my other examples where I learned I was very good at crisis comm. And I had agreed to go to Hong Kong to handle communications out there for a short period of time. It's supposed to be a month or period of
Oh,
time. It turned out I had already accepted that role before 9/11, and then 9/11 happened, and everyone's like, "Are you still going to go?" And the reason why I was going out there was that when J.P. Morgan Chase merged, there were 2 heads of communication, one from Chase, one from J.P. Morgan out there, and 2 different teams. And my boss wanted me to be able to support the new CEO who was out there and sort of get a read on what was needed. And about, I don't know how many weeks into it, I think I got a call asking if I would stay and be the head of communication for overseeing 18 countries and a 4-way merger out in Asia. So I had to call my husband and say, "Hey, how do you feel about living in Hong Kong?" And so, yes, that opportunity opened up a ton for us as a family. And it's one of the most
what?
exciting times of my life, other than what I'm doing now.
So let's talk about 9/11 because I know a little bit of the backstory from what you've already shared with me. And I think it's such an interesting kind of pivotal moment in your career when you did what other people weren't doing.
That's
You
true.
stayed. What, so describe that for us. Um, what
Yeah,
was your role and what did you step into and lean into during that crisis?
yeah. The morning of 9/11, when you're in investment banking, you get to work very, very early. And so that's a benefit to, I was up extremely early, and I had an office down at 60 Wall Street, as well as an office up at headquarters in Midtown. And I told my husband, "Hey, I'm leaving." And he thought I was going, he wasn't sure which office I was going to, but I got a call from an executive who I was supposed to meeting with, and he said, "Hey, no need to come down to Wall Street. Meet me up at Midtown." So number one, that was the first very positive thing that happened. Otherwise, I would have been down at Wall Street. When I got to work that day, I went into my boss's office, and his partner had called him saying, "I just saw a plane hit a building." It wasn't even on the news yet. We thought it was maybe not real. We have TVs everywhere because we're in public relations. Pretty soon it came up, and very soon after, right past the MetLife building, we could see that this when the second plane hit, and then what we called, it was like an E.F. Hutton moment. It got real quiet. A lot of people on that communications floor just started panicking and they fled. Obviously, people got nervous about bridges getting closed. They got nervous about, uh, you know, bridges, tunnels, and getting stuck in New York City. I think in that moment when you're living there, you actually thought, are we under attack? Is there more coming? What's happening?
Right.
And so every person's reaction was valid. It's just very interesting to see how different people react. And so I wound up staying with my boss, handling inbound media
Can
calls.
I pause you there?
Yeah.
Because there was something that you shared with me that I think is very um, unique. It sounded like you trusted your intuition in that moment. There was something inside of you that said, "Stay."
Yeah, I felt very clear about need need to stay and assess. I think people have fight or flight reactions a lot of time, and my reaction in that moment was, I have everything I need at my fingertips right here. I don't need to leave this building. I need to determine what is going on, and for myself, for my family, and for this business, and for the city, right? And we have to understand what's the context, and so. Um, that that was just my reaction. Interestingly, my husband ran across town, uh, pushed past security, and was standing in front of me at my office in a suit, sweating. He was
Oh,
so glad to see I was okay because he couldn't reach me, right? So there's a lot going on at that time, but a lot of what we had to do, was first, that day was terrible, and there were a lot of after effects and additional threats, and people wondering what was happening next, and we had everything from anthrax scares, and it seemed like there was crisis after in the midst of all that. And I think that you don't want to get numb to it, but you do need to keep a really clear head. And what we needed to understand was what was happening with the psychology of our employees at that time. When you're in a bank, you have to keep the bank running, and people live in New Jersey and Connecticut, and we really needed to provide mental health support. So a lot of this was internal communications as well, bringing in experts and helping them be readily available for employees. And our firm was very lucky. We lost one person that day who was exiting, walking down a flight of stairs, and had a heart attack, specifically in the exit. And that was a very, very sad, obviously experience, but we also learned some interesting things. We also realized that some of our fellow banks were unable to function because their technology had gotten knocked out. So we were able to offer our server facilities in New Jersey and other places to keep those
wow.
banks. So our competition. So
Wow.
one of the things I've learned through the crisis of 9/11 and then living in Hong Kong during SARS is that competition becomes frenemies when all hell is breaking loose.
Mhm.
So you really want to share best practices. You want to try because we're in this together. This isn't like a one company issue. It becomes sort of a community and industry, and then how do we help each other? And so luckily, I have seen it has brought out the best in some of us, and I've seen some great examples of camaraderie and
Mm.
learning, but also respecting that everybody reacts differently, and it's not anyone's role to judge other people in a crisis. We all have to just respect that we're humans, and we
Yeah.
need to give each other what each other needs in those moments.
What did you learn about how to navigate crisis just within your company? What sorts of things were takeaways, learnings that were obvious to you through going through that?
Biggest one was I think that big companies often do have some level of crisis playbook.
Mhm.
Uh, it doesn't it doesn't it's not like here it is, plug it in, it's going to work, right? There's a lot of coming together, a lot of communication that has to happen on a daily basis, and you have to create the right team of individuals that need to be in that crisis team. And so, one of the things that I've really carried forward here at Redfan with our clients is really making sure that they consider the importance of having a framework for a crisis plan. And when I say crisis, people think, oh, well, how often is that going to happen? Issues bubble up and become crises. So you also have to teach employees how to raise issues to management's attention and have a method for doing that so that it can get caught sooner versus it turning into a crisis. And so those are the types of things that I work on with our clients to make sure that they actually have a plan in place. And then we're on the 411 for a lot of companies that are not on our website that call us when they're under distress and need support.
Mm-hmm.
And if we have the capacity, we certainly step up and make sure we're available to make that possible.
Mm-hmm. And then what was Hong Kong like? Such a big change for you and your husband, right?
Well, yeah, and I got to Hong Kong initially by myself, and I was there for about 3 months initially, and it was fantastic because I was coming from New York and I was coming right out of 9/11, right? So um, it was a little bit like, oh gosh, I have a big project to focus on, and I can, at night check in with my people back in New York and see what's going on in New York City. But it was fantastic to kind of look at. We had a four-way merger there. My chairman had outlined what the goals were for the business. And I said, okay, well, and he had never been in the press before. He was in his 50s. He was originally from Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs has a different philosophy around media relations than JP Morgan Chase did. We really wanted our executives to be a little bit more present and a little bit more out there speaking. And so he said, I'm in your hands. So I basically helped him kind of build out. They were rebuilding the equity part of our business. We were building out some parts, and my goal was to take us from, I think we were number 5 in the market to number 1 or 2, and we did that. We also restructured. I did have to lay off some people and also hire the people that we needed to take us. When we needed Mandarin speakers, if you're going to be trying to grow in mainland China, we needed certain elements. We created all sorts of cool things. We created new customer entertainment opportunities for our private wealth management. I remember we hired Andre Agassi to do private tennis lessons, and for clients and all sorts of cool stuff.
So creative.
Really differentiating ourselves in the market as bringing unique opportunities and experiences there, which was really, really fun.
Wow. And then your husband joined you after you decided to stay. How long were you there?
We were there for 5.5 years. And so, yes, he joined and he wound up working for China Light and Power in alternative energy, which was a really exciting time, wind energy, all sorts of new technologies. My husband is an engineer and PhD from MIT. So this was a great opportunity. And it turned out that they were looking for his skill set and not finding it. And so it just worked out perfectly. Took a little time, but it was the right role and it worked out great.
And then you started your family there, right?
We did. I remember it was an interesting situation. I was doing a panel of women bankers, and we had interns or from all the different banks. These were mostly all young women who were looking for career advice. And so we had bankers from all these different banks. And I was sitting in that panel, and a woman up there who I respected a lot, she said, I got so caught up in my career, I forgot to have children and I forgot to put time into my marriage. And today, I'm divorced and I have no children. And I remember thinking, I'm going to go home and get pregnant. I had been promoted. I was at the top of my game. And I thought, I'm not going to sit around and wait. I'm ready for this. And I remember it was really funny because my husband and I had this huge party at our apartment one day. And the next morning, he's like, oh, I have something. I go, I have something. We both reached under the bed and pulled out pregnancy tests at the same time. Because he's like, I'm pretty sure you're pregnant. And I was like, yeah.
He knew?
Yep. He's a very insightful man. And so that was Jillian, our daughter Jillian, who actually is named after my grandmother, who was also a pioneer in the telephone company, who lived to 101 in the Boston area. And she passed away only 2 weeks after I got to Hong Kong. Her name was Lillian Grace. And I named my daughter Jillian Grace, just changed that L to a G. So yeah, very excited. Very excited. Yep.
Wow, what a legacy.
Yeah, it was fantastic. And big changes though. When you live in Hong Kong, you are expected to have a live-in ama with you, and we were like, oh, do we really want that? But you really almost can't function in that community without it. You can't get things delivered to your house. You have to really understand all the different ways of surviving there. So you wind up. We had a fantastic woman who was from the Philippines who lived in our home, and she cooked and took care of our child and was there when I got home every day. And she became part of our family. And she actually moved to the United States with us as well. She was here and was able to save enough money to go back and buy the farm next to her mom's home that she wanted in the Philippines for her retirement. So, just trying to create opportunities all around. That was really
What was
important.
different about life there? What else was different that was a kind of an essential element?
You are expected to be really to be it Hong Kong sounds like it's big, but it's in the scope of things, it's actually pretty small. It's very hard to have privacy, right? Like everywhere you go, you're going to run into colleagues,
Mm.
and including any beach I went to in Thailand. I'd look over and like, there's somebody from JP Morgan. And I remember just thinking, that's so funny. And, you're expected to belong to clubs. We were, which is part of networking. And these clubs are very old, they've been around forever. And the firms help you get, membership and you have to get interviewed. And I remember being interviewed. I was a member of the LRC, the Ladies Recreation Club, which is not just for ladies. And we had to go for like a formal tea and, those types of things, right? So there's still, even though the handover had taken place a long time ago, there's still very much a very British feeling to it, and just lovely. I really enjoyed the international aspect of learning about, what people were doing, different cultures, and you just think differently when that experience has made my life so much more rich and how I think about helping clients every day.
How so?
I'll sit down with clients and I'm thinking about, okay, what are you doing? You want to do nonprofit work. Like, what does that really look like? What do you do? What are you doing internationally? What's happening in that market? We rebuilt when I was at JP Morgan, I helped to restructure the entire uh, nonprofit philanthropy effort to really map to what was going on in every market. And that, we had quite a bit of money to give, but I also made sure we were giving time, not just writing checks. And so today when I'm sitting down with clients, I talk about what's your authentic, stamp in your community and how are you giving back and what are you doing? And I think that matters a ton for companies today. It also matters a lot for employees who are looking at companies that they want to join. They want to see what are the values that this company holds? What are you doing in this community? How can I help? Can I actually get involved? And I think that is part of the kind of the fiber of companies today.
It makes me think about the soul of a company.
Absolutely. The
Right.
soul. Yeah.
And that's what people want to feel like they're making a difference. They want to feel connected to a purpose. And if it's just a revenue generating machine, they're not going to have the loyalty
Right.
and the retention because they could just get another job doing the same thing somewhere else. And so to feel connected to the soul of a company makes a ton of difference for people.
In fact, here in Austin, the Chamber of Commerce has it's a group that I helped to create, and then we actually brought it into the Chamber of Commerce. It's called Austin Gives, and we recognize it's an awards program, companies that are giving back in really creative ways involving their employees. So we look at what are the ways you might be giving back, and there's incredible stories that come out from these companies of all sizes. And we have awards for every single size. And I spent a couple of hours the other day reviewing 20 submissions, and they were just so impressive. What's great is we're sharing those stories, and then other company leaders are learning from those stories
Inspiring.
and being able to start, thinking
Because
about,
they can see the it's being modeled, right? They can see, oh, this is possible. What could we do? And
yeah,
it really inspires those ideas.
Absolutely. And the thing is that, companies want to move into new markets, right? And you want to land and expand. And one of the best ways to land and expand is start to understand what can you do to give back in that
Hmm.
community.
Hmm.
And if you're just hoping to show up and have a building and start hiring, maybe you're not thinking it through all the way, right?
Yeah.
How are you? What is your purpose for being
Hmm.
in this new city? And so we help companies think about that, all across the country.
Yeah.
But obviously, Austin, I spent a lot of time, looking at things a little more closely here.
What strikes me is that you've had all of these jobs that you didn't necessarily have experience or training in. You stepped into roles and you got recruited into higher level roles and promoted. You stepped into these major mergers and acquisitions and learned the international scene. Were you intimidated when you were taking on those new assignments? Or did you just see it as like, "Oh, this will be a fun challenge?"
Well, I do remember during the dot-com stage, when things were going wild, I remember just getting thrown full into it. And one of the things that I've always known about myself is that I will go and learn, and I will go ask the top experts. So when I was a tech reporter, I would go and call the analyst at Gartner or Forrester and say, "Hey, I'm writing an article about, this standard microprocessor. I'm including the following companies. Have you heard from anyone else that I should be including in my piece?"
Hmm.
And they would be my expert, right? So I learned early on how to very successfully kind of outline where are my gaps and how am I going to learn, and who
Yeah.
do I need to circle my wagons with, and who do I need to, put around me, because one person by themselves is not the answer. It's having a really great infrastructure of people.
Mhm.
And so, I'm sure I was intimidated, but even today, I mean, we sit down with M&A company, clients who are going through M&A activity, and we they bring us in early, and the PE firms love seeing us there early because number one, we're not only right there for the press relations, we're putting the entire messaging document together. We're
Yeah.
outlining the messaging for every single stakeholder, and we're helping them think through, hey, you worked so hard to get this financial deal together. But imagine if you did not communicate effectively to your employees or to your other investors or to your customers, and they found out because through an article in the Wall Street Journal. Who are you going to annoy? And then what kind of mess do you have to clean up after that if you don't
Totally.
actually use your communications firm effectively to build out an entire strategy? And so I'm thinking about the company as the brand and the reputation that they have. And I'm thinking about who are all the stakeholders that touch that? And then how do we make sure they feel that they were cared for by
Mm.
this brand? And that is really one of the most important roles we can play.
Building on that concept, you mentioned that it's much like you see things like a chessboard. In other words, you are looking at all of the different pieces, all of the stakeholders, every relationship.
Yeah.
How is it that, I mean, I'm assuming your brain is just wired that way, but can you talk more about how that chess game plays out in the work that you do and how you leverage your skill set to be able to help leaders see all of those different pieces?
I think one of my favorite phrases is play the tape. So you play the tape forward and what are all the scenarios that could possibly happen. And
Okay.
when you play the tape, you start to realize, oh yeah, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And it helps
Yeah.
the CEO. And instead of me just telling the CEO, this is what you need to do, I say, let's walk through what happens in the different communities that we need to be communicating to and what will matter. Is there anyone who would be really important that you need to personally pick up the phone for? So it gets down to that level of detail because I'm thinking about that CEO's reputation in the middle of an M&A deal, right? Who is going to be okay with just getting an email, communication versus would expect a phone call? And what would be the fallout if you did not make that phone call? So playing the tape is one of the best things that you can do is sit with somebody and say, let's play the tape. what's the scenario? Here's what I'm thinking. Is there anyone, that you're thinking? And you kind of put that together. And for me, that involves the CEO or the C-suite. When you can get them thinking on their feet versus just here's a little checklist, it makes them realize, wow, you are a trusted advisor. You're really getting me thinking. And now I understand the value of this relationship at a totally different level.
So different. I'm imagining just how different that is for a leader to visualize their specific future
Yeah.
with the company and the employees and the partners and all of it versus what probably happens a lot, Kathleen, is a consultant comes in and tells them the playbook and then it's like, well, there's nuance that isn't being factored in, and it's not a formula. It's actually very customized to each stakeholder and
Yeah,
that
it's
particular
true.
business.
And it's the same thing in brand positioning. In the old days, people would do the brand positioning, then they would show up, go home, go do all the research. The communications firm would do all the research. They'd come back and they'd pull the rabbit out of the hat and say, "Here's your magic rabbit," right? And everyone would be like, "Ooh," but they didn't know how they got to it, right?
Right.
So, say management changes and they come in and go, "How did we get to this messaging? I don't even know."
Mhm.
Then all that smarty pants work kind of goes out the window when you start over again. Whereas if you do brand positioning, and then what we do is we do a workshop with the management team at the end, and we show them solutions, but it's a talk through process,
Yeah.
and they come to the conclusion with us as opposed to us saying, here's the magic rabbit.
And you're co-creating it.
Yes,
And then
yes.
of course then there's buy-in and there's ownership and all of
Yeah.
that. There's a
Yeah.
lot of
And then even if somebody
management.
changes out of that executive team, 12 people know, 11 are like, well, we were there for that meeting and here's what we were thinking. And that's how we got to this
Yeah.
decision. It wasn't one CEO in a private meeting with a PR firm that was like,
Mhm.
oh, we came up with this, right? So understanding the value and the shelf life of the work you're doing is really important.
When did you start to visualize doing your own thing and creating Red Fan?
I think I started visualizing that probably at the last agency I was at. I realized that my ethics and the way I managed clients was very different. I was in an agency where there was high turnover, but my tech practice had next to no turnover at all in clients and my employees as well. And I thought it's almost like I'm running my own agency within an agency. Um, and then just I had a different threshold of ethics and how I ran things, and so I kept like tucked that in the back of my mind before I went off to the corporate world again. And when I was coming back into moving back to the United States, I thought initially when I got to Austin that I would just do some consulting. I would start by doing some consulting. And I went and met with a CEO who wanted to bring his company public and here in town. And I told him, here's my background, all that. And in the end, he kept saying, well, I really need to own you. Like, I really need you to be a full-time employee. And remember, I have little kids at home and I knew I'd work around the clock. I'm just kind
I'm
of,
curious, did he use the word own? Or
yeah,
is
he's
that how
like,
you heard it?
I heard it that way. It was
Okay.
like he could not get his arms around or his head around this idea that I could be the Sherpa that helped him through an IPO process without being a full-time employee. And I and in an office and at a desk. And of course, this is long before, we're where we are today, right? But I went home and I remember I went outside and I sat with my husband and I was crying. I said, why do people need to feel like they need to own me? Why do they feel like they need to, have every minute of my day, 9 to 5, as if I'm like going to gyp them of time or something, or if I'm not going to work. And I said, I've been talking about starting this company. It's time to do it. Like, it's time for me to just be real clear about this is what I'm doing. This is how I'm doing it. And that was the change, right? And actually, it was funny because I had one of my first clients. I didn't have business cards made up, and I had started, and she handed me a business card with her brand on it with my name, and I was like, oh no, no, remember I'm a consultant. Like I had to remind people,
Uh-huh.
I'm I'm not, I don't work for, you're my client. There we go, right? So, and then I had the great opportunity to teach at UT, and I won Best Professor, that year. So started to realize, like, yeah, I know where I need to be, and I know it's time for me to do this.
And what does red fan mean?
Well, yeah, this was interesting. Red fan, this concept of red fan just came to me really long ago. I kept thinking if I ever have a company, as I was leaving Hong Kong in particular, I think red fan is going to be the name. And I kind of tucked that in my mind. And part of it was I was raised by a family of lawyers and judges and teachers. And I remember law firms all do Smith, Knoll, Crimson, whoever the names are. And I thought,
Yeah.
I don't want to go that route. And I always know that agencies are only as good as the people that, are in them and the community they have and what they're offering. So Red Fan really is my sayonara to the corporate world. If you look at it, it looks like a little fan hand, saying goodbye. But
Okay.
also, if you look at it structurally, it's feminine, it's red, it's bold, but it also has these fins. To create a fan, there are fins that, come down like to wave yourself, to cool yourself. And each fin is great people, great services, great community, great products. All those things come together, and when they are at the base structurally, that's the nirvana. That's when things really happen. So for me, it's not about one person; it's about how we work together.
Mhm. Red fan communications.
Hmm.
Love it. And when before we jumped on here, we were talking about some of our childhood memories and what communications look like way back when, and your beginnings of entrepreneurship. Will you tell the story about your first kind of entrepreneurship job?
Yeah, it's really funny. I grew up on the North Shore of Long Island and right on a golf course with a road down to the Long Island Sound. And there was a young man who was a little older than I was, lived next door, and his sisters and stuff. And I loved going over there. I kind of looked up to him a lot. He taught me how to fish. I didn't have a brother, so he was kind of like guy who'd be like, I'll bring you fishing. And one day he was getting ready to go off to Cornell. He was getting ready to go to college, and he had started a golf ball business where he was selling golf balls back to the golfers at the golf club. And he said, Kathleen, you could take over my business. And I said, really? And so I did. So he hand drew like a guide for me with a T and a ball on it. And it was Kathleen's business. I think I was 12 at the time. And it became kind of funny because my mom one day was like, there's a man in the driveway, here to buy 100 golf balls from you. And I had balls that were, had chips in them to use for practice. So those were sold at one price. And then I had balls that were pristine and perfect. And by the way, I also had balls that had people's last name on it. Now I call them the shame balls because, they were over in the woods. Be careful about putting your name on a ball. But it was really, really fun. And, I had this experience, sort of an epiphany. I ran into Billy, the guy who was my neighbor, and I was at my father's wake actually, and I hadn't thought about my golf ball business in such a long time. And here I am, in my 40s, and he, comes up to give me a hug at my father's wake. And I looked at him and I said, Billy, you're part of the reason I'm an entrepreneur. Deep down in my soul, I've always had this in me, and you gave me some of the wings to kind of really think that I could do this. And my mom and my dad were always just like, wow, shocked at who was pulling up the driveway to buy balls from Kathleen. I mean, just, I got quite a reputation. So it's really fun.
Amazing. And then tell us about your dad and the transition that he made and you watching him make those decisions in his career and as it related to family and what
Yeah.
opened up.
I would say I feel like you don't always know how lucky you are about the parents you have until I think often you go off to college and you meet other people and other communities and things like that. But I really reflect on my father, especially. He was a high power attorney in New York City. And when I was in first grade, he decided, you know what, family is more important than, being at a high power law firm where I'm, never home, not seeing my family. And he decided to join the oldest law firm on Long Island and reverse commute. So commute from, further out on the island, about an hour every day, instead of going into the city. And he did it for a year to make sure he really loved working at this law firm. And then he moved our family out to this beautiful, place where we had, 3 acres, and we, the golf course across the street. And I could be a tomboy going down to uh, the waterfront, throwing bottles with messages out to people I don't know, and all the crazy things I did as a youngster. And one of the things that was so vivid for me was he chose family, and he still had an incredible profession. And he was available to be my softball coach and my sister's softball coach. And, just when I later in life, one of my first jobs in college, I came home and I was working as a bank teller, and people would come in and my name was on a plaque, when people walked up to the bank teller thing, and they'd say, "Are you Larry Kitty's daughter?" And I remember thinking, gosh, I always thought my dad was cool, but like literally everyone loves him.
Wow.
And I realized he had become such a community man, in such incredible ways. And while he always left a huge impression on me, I have carried that forward in how I live my life and the choices I've made for our family. I think my husband really looked up to my dad. He saw what my father had done and just was like, wow, that's so cool. Like,
Mm.
there's so much pressure on men and women to make the money and do all the things. And sometimes we have to really sit back and think about, can you have both? And what are you giving up if you don't make, smart decisions at different stages of your career? And
Yeah.
so, you know, even moving to Austin, Texas was a really big, bold move for both of us. 20 years ago, we decided to move to Austin, Texas. We first traveled around the United States. My husband and I made a spreadsheet of all the things we cared about. We had 6 locations we wanted to check out. And we chose Austin, Texas in the end, and bought our house with no jobs, no careers, nothing we had. We had to build everything from scratch. And I used to say to my husband, we're either cocky, crazy, or both. And he said, look, we're pretty far along in our career. We've got great reputation. It's going to work out. And we had an 18-month-old, and here we are today. We love it. It's worked out great.
Amazing. So, what advice would you give to female leaders, those that might be in corporate, but also those who are female founders and or want to be? They have it in their heart, and they maybe they're afraid to take that big leap of faith because it does feel so uncertain and scary. What have you learned that you would love to pass along to them?
Well, one of the things that I did when I first started thinking about starting Red Fan was I met with a couple of other people who had started their own firms, as well, and kind of asked them like, what did they, what had worked, what hadn't worked, and asked the questions. And we weren't looking at each other as direct competitors. It was almost like a community, of support. And I think that was really great. And some of those early conversations helped me kind of understand, okay, I know how to be a little bit different. And I've learned some things from that. I do think building a community around yourself is extremely important, and having mentors. And, for example, right now I'm on the board of the BBB, here in town, and we've just started an incubator for women entrepreneurs.
Hmm.
And we're going to have one here. We're going to have one in Houston as well. And we're actually teaching, you're starting your business. How do you do the accounting part? Like, how do you learn how to read your books? How do you build your own marketing plan around your business? And so all the things that somebody who's starting a business, or even thinking about starting a business, or maybe has a business and they haven't had that kind of mentorship,
Right.
we're surrounding them with all of that for free. And
Fantastic.
I think that there are cities that have those types of women community support, and look for that. And if you don't have it, you got to build it yourself. But there's plenty of people who are so excited to do that.
That's so true. So true. People that want to give based on their experiences, and it's easy for them because they've been through it. It,
100%.
I leverage the small business development centers that are
Mhm.
usually connected with the chambers of commerce. And back in Virginia, where I started my business, and in Colorado when I moved here, and just amazing people that have such expertise that are, ready and willing. to help in all kinds of ways with entrepreneurs and business leaders. It's fantastic.
Well, I was looking at the statistics, and every state you should look at how much of the state is small businesses. And
Uh-huh.
usually, if the economy is really strong in small business, first of all, that's a good place to actually start your business because it means that there's an infrastructure that allows for that support. And
Wow.
so, when you're looking at where to live or where you think you could be successful doing this, I think it's important to recognize that because you get that community result. And here in Texas, there's a lot of big companies, but those big companies actually rely a lot on small businesses to function.
Huh.
And what we start to look at, if you go to some of the economic discussions at, Chamber of Commerce's, you'll start to realize that, Samsung here in Austin requires a lot of small businesses to keep them going. And
Hmm.
they will say that straight up. They're actually part of the BBB. And so they want to be part of that. And I think that's important to realize that we need to coexist. And that's pretty exciting.
Well, you are definitely a lioness, and I define a lioness as feminine strength, grace, and courage. So, what is your next lioness brave step that you are going to take?
Well, I think I've been talking about eventually writing a book, which is something I've been really wanting to do. But I think that's a little bit further out. I think right now, continuing to be an incredible mentor to other women and young men that are looking at being in this career. This career is evolving quite a bit and helping people understand what that means and what they need to learn in order to do, really be value add. I think is extremely important. And that also keeps me fresh because I
Mhm.
like constantly learning. And so it's kind of a mutual love affair there. And I believe that, helping other businesses succeed, that's just good karma. So that's where I
Mhm.
put a lot of my energy. But there will be a book in the near future, Jen, probably in the next 2 years. I'm working on some ideas there and
Do you
a
have
lot
a
of good
focus yet?
stories. Uh, I've done a couple of interesting things on crisis comms, on all the things that you've never seen, behind closed doors, what really goes on, what it takes, and kind of like I call it the deodorant commercial. Never let them see you sweat type moments.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember those old commercials,
Yeah.
but I think that's going to be part of it. This idea that, you know, when you're in communications, when you're in this role, there's so much that you have to do that is in many ways an unsung hero role.
Mhm.
And I think that there's so many great unsung heroes that are behind the scenes doing things to help executives. And I think we need to shine a light on them. So I'm
So
shining a
true.
few lights.
So true. I can't wait to follow your story.
Well, same here. I can't wait to follow your story.
So, how can people get connected with you? What's the best way?
Well, I'm very active on LinkedIn, Kathleen Lucente. Also, Red Fan Communications. If you go over to our website, redfancommunications.com, you can reach out to me straight there or Kathleen at redfancommunications.com.
Okay.
And then I also have two newsletters from the desk of, which I go out and through over the month, I speak to a lot of different executives to kind of find out what their pain points are, what's happening. And then I write a piece that is pretty on point with, there's a through line, if you will, that
Hmm.
people can truly connect with. So it's a great way to, check out my line of thinking and what I'm able to provide executive level, people.
That's awesome. So we can find that newsletter and sign up for it on the website?
Absolutely. Right on the
Okay.
website. Yeah. And I also just put out a zero click guide as well. This is really because right now, just what's happening with SEO and shifting, helping companies understand how to change their marketing dollars towards
Mm.
thought leadership and driving market authority to AI by taking that really seriously and realizing that in the B2B space today, I think it's 85% of sales. People are pulling up a list based on what they already know on reputation, as well as just doing a search on AI. And if you're not showing up there, you could really be putting your money in the wrong places. And so you have the opportunity to drive that authority and change that dynamic. And it's some smart changes that you can make to really ensure that you're being found and remembered.
I'm going to follow what you're putting out there.
Okay.
I'm going to sign up for that newsletter because that sounds really interesting. So, Kathleen Lucente on LinkedIn and redfancommunications.com. Kathleen, thank you so much for sharing your Lioness story with us.
Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun, a great conversation. I enjoyed it.
Definitely. Me too. Me too. And thanks for tuning in, everybody. Until the next episode, the Lioness in me sees the Lioness in you.